Dzień dobry, witam wszystkich w kolejnej rozmowie Gość Pafere numer 2. Ponownie spotykamy się z Michałem Swietowym.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me again.
So I would like to continue our first talk, and I have some more question about libertarianism, you and your position in this libertarian movement.
Yeah.
So the first question is, what is your attitude toward COVID, all this situation? Can you explain how you perceive this?
Well, it's government encroaching on people's liberties. It's obviously the threat of Chinese coronavirus is overestimated, and if people were given the real numbers, the numbers that we have today, a year and a half ago, they would never submit to lockdowns, and I see it as a power grab and nothing else.
Okay, so because I perceive it as a tool just to manage to handle society.
Of course, it's the same thing. Again, the important thing is there is no conspiracy. There is just opportunity. So it's like 9/11. 9/11 happened, and it was an opportunity for the government to destroy people's privacy. COVID happened. It's a real illness. It's dangerous. It's not as dangerous as they told us a year and a half ago, but it is dangerous, and it was used as an opportunity to destroy civil rights and to make people more manageable
and become more stronger. Okay, next question, case study. I would like to ask you precisely how you introduce new people who are, let's say, they come to you and they say, okay, I have heard something about libertarianism, and I heard that you are the guru of this movement. Okay, convince me that I should join you.
Well, I take sort of a utilitarian and populist approach. I validate their values, I validate their feelings, and explain how libertarianism is actually the way to realize their ideal life.
For example, I would like to...
Well, for example, if you talk to a homosexual, for example, you explain that, well, libertarians think that government should not control unions. They should not have a hand at who people spend their time with, who they sleep with, etc., etc. And libertarianism is good for you. If you're talking to a homophobe, you tell exact same thing. You say, well, we're for freedom of association, and you can have a school, you know, where your kids are taught in a traditional manner. If you talk to a Jew, for example, you say the same thing. You explain that, well, libertarians welcome all ethnicities. It's just, we don't care about your skin color as long as you accept the non-aggression principle and freedom of association. If you talk to anti-Semite, you say the exact same thing, because libertarianism is good for everyone, but you got to make a different case for different people.
Okay, and for example, when you talk to the poor?
Poor
Poor people.
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually had a lecture that I read from inside the police van where I was explaining how libertarianism is good for the poor. But it's a real simple question, because government is the source of poverty. There hasn't been a single success story where government made people richer. It's always the other way around. It's always the market. The only reason why people don't realize that is because the socialist Marxist propaganda is very efficient at delivering their message, because libertarians have not been efficient so far. And the message I have, and it's actually the concept that should be familiar for the Poles, is nomenclature.
Yeah.
That's a ruling class. That's your real enemy. That's who steals all your money. That's the reason why you're poor. You have to explain that concept, because once you explain it, everything falls into place. Because the important thing is, you can feed off left rhetoric. Because if you take any communist slogan and replace bourgeoisie with nomenclature, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's your real enemy. And it's proven to be very efficient in my work. People like the idea of nomenclature, and in English it's establishment. It's pretty much the same thing. Establishment is a less precise word, but the concept is similar. So you got to have an enemy. Your enemy is a nomenclature, and the nomenclature is the reason of all your ills, the reason for your poverty, and it's really easy to
convince poor.
Not just convince, but to demonstrate, because there are super rich in communist countries, and they are nomenclature. There are super rich people in Venezuela. Those are the kids of Chavez. You know, the daughter of Chavez had hundreds of millions of dollars in the American bank account. We see children of Castro and his generals traveling around Florida and California in expensive cars. So those are the enemy, the super rich. The problem I have with traditional liberals is that they tend to align themselves with the rich. I never do that, because I don't care if you're rich or you're poor, as long as you respect as long as you respect non-aggression principle, you're a libertarian, and you got to make case for the poor, and the case for the poor is made for you because nomenclature steals money using government transfer of money, steals money from your pockets, ensuring its own dominance over the people.
Case study how you talk with the leftists.
But that's
already
you
told,
talk
yeah.
to the poor and to the leftists in the same manner. You shouldn't expect to convince everyone. It's never going to happen, and you have to be smart about your time. So every time I read a lecture, and I've read hundreds of lectures in my life, there's always someone in the audience who just doesn't want to hear to you, listen to you. And the smart thing to do is move to the next person, because there's always someone who hasn't heard you yet, and it's a dumb idea to waste your time on someone who's just not who's not planning to listen to you at all. That's how education works, and that's what I do.
Now the question, I am always...
Can I just, don't try to convince radical communists. It's useless. There's always people who want power. There's always fanatics. You're interested in those who follow them. Those are the people you want to convince, because radicals and the fanatics are in a tiny, tiny, tiny minority.
Okay. And now the question, very important question, because if someone pays you, you are dependent from him. Okay, so
Yeah, so that's
so the question is, who pays for your activity?
Well, no, nobody pays for my activity. I mean, like I collect donations, so there's no one person, and I don't know most of people who donate to me. I mean, some of them are in the Telegram chat room with me. That's the only benefit they get. So it's my audience, people who come to listen, people who enjoy my YouTube channel. That's that. And plus, I'm financially independent. I invested in Bitcoin in 2011. Before it was $1. So yeah, and I haven't sold all of it.
Yeah. Okay. So you are completely independent, and libertarianism it is your passion.
I think in the Bible there's this quote that whomever has the most, owes the most. I'm butchering the quote because I don't remember it in English. But the point is that I have a lot of freedom, and I want to use that freedom to help other people become free, because you can only be free in a free society. I hate this idea that you can be a lord among slaves, but you can't be a free person.
It's not honest.
You can't be a free person among slaves.
Yeah.
Because and to me, freedom is important, and I'm fighting for my own freedom. But my own freedom comes only with the freedom of society.
You were charged of sexual misconduct and promotion of Nazism. Can you tell something about this? What was it?
Russian government is very smart at smearing opposition, and they never actually prosecute opposition with political laws. They try to invent something that will look bad in the news. And if we're talking about Nazi propaganda, I actually had I had a video on my YouTube channel, it's still on, where I explained how political compass worked. And I explained that, well, in the left bottom corner, there are the true bloodthirsty criminals, the Nazis and the communists. And I showed swastika in that corner. And me showing swastika was deemed by the Russian court as Nazi propaganda. So that's what they do. The sexual misconduct is a similar story. I've dated a girl for over 8 years, the same girl, and we started dating when she was 17. And it's an age of consent in Russia, but someone on the internet said that she was actually 15. And because of that, there was investigation open into my case, but of course we didn't find anything, because thankfully she saved our first, how do you call it? Email exchange there, where she actually introduced herself. She was the one who wrote me first. And we've been together for 8 years, and I've been prosecuted for that, and she's been prosecuted for that. She was actually pressured by the government to tell on me that I actually did something inappropriate. But
so they used the tactic just to coin a label, okay, homosexual or sexual misconduct or Nazi,
exactly.
fascist.
If you Google my name, I mean, you'll find everything, whatever sticks.
Okay, so you've been in prison several times.
Yeah.
Could you tell me some of your experience? How do you perceive Russian penitentiary system? Okay, have you been put to the cell with criminals and?
Yeah, I've been. Criminals are not the problem because they're actually sympathetic to you, and they always act surprised when you tell them that you got like this long sentence for something ridiculous, like Nazi propaganda, or for like the kinds of the things you mentioned. And when you explain to them what happened, they're interested and they never touch you because political convicts are, well, they have a like, high reputation in the criminal hierarchy.
Yeah.
Not the highest, obviously, but respectable. So criminals are never the problem. It's always the police. But thankfully, because I'm relatively known in Russia, I always have media attention on me when something happens. And it
What kind
protected
of
me.
media, sorry? Mainstream media?
No. We have some. I mean, like bloggers. I mean, like some foreign media.
So
There is-
this is, in some extent, it's an influential force.
Of course, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, at least if there's nobody looking after you in the media, then horrible thing can happen to you. Like there's been instances of torture, there's been instances of threat, etc., etc. But if you're known like I am, then the
Yeah.
government sort of backs off a little bit because if something happens to you, you know, it will be all over the news, international news as well, and they try to avoid that. Because
Okay.
it makes you a martyr. But if it happens to someone who's not known, like there's this case of Dadin, Yuri Dadin, I'm a friend with him. He was tortured in police, and he became known after the fact, but it didn't help him much when he was tortured.
Okay, so now your contact with state representatives. I would like to, maybe you have the most scary contact and most humorous.
Well, the scariest one was in Kemerovo. I think I mentioned it last time, I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
I was going to read a lecture in Kemerovo, that's a city in Siberia, in Russia, and I took a plane there. And the moment I left the clean zone of the airport, I was apprehended by thugs. They beat me up, they locked me in the room, they punched me and take away my documents, and they kept me locked for several hours. And then they took me out of the room and put me on the empty plane back to Moscow, telling me that they're not going to let me read a lecture in Kemerovo. So that was the scariest thing that happened to me because I didn't know who these people were. I knew they were with the government because they were acting freely
they
inside
wear
the
uniforms,
airport.
or-
They didn't wear any uniforms. No, they were wearing civilian clothes. They were very big, very threatening, but they were acting at home in the airport. And the moment they boarded me on the plane, they passed through all the checks, all the registrations without any control. So I know they were with the government, but I have no idea who they were. Probably secret police.
The most funny?
The funniest one, well,
Your speech from...
Yeah, my speech from inside the police van is probably the best memory I have. I was supposed to give a speech on the Libertarian Forum in Moscow, but they caught me midway to the forum. They locked me in the police van, and I have this thing that I do not allow. Like the only time my speech was cancelled was in Kemerovo. There's nothing I could do. But I have this principle that I do not let government to cancel my events. So what I did is I recorded my lecture on the cell phone from inside the police van. I sent it to the organizers of the forum, and they played it on the big screen, and that was great. And it's on my YouTube channel. It's called A Lecture from the Police Van, and I was actually explaining how libertarianism is good for the poor.
Okay, great. So probably we will download this and make some Polish subtitles.
Okay.
Okay. Now a couple of personal questions. What kind of joke? Maybe you have your favorite joke. It may be political or not. But
A joke.
A joke.
I'm not sure about jokes. I have a lot of quotes that I like.
Okay,
I'm not sure
go
about
on.
jokes. There's the quote I stole from Barry Goldwater, the nominee for the American president. He said that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, and moderation in the defense of justice is no virtue. And I subscribe to that. That's a really powerful quote.
It's your favorite quote.
It's a very powerful quote, and I think it delivers just the right message. Yeah.
What are you reading? What your best? So if someone asks you, what should I read? What
Well, it
kind of
depends.
books you could recommend?
It depends who's asking me, but if you're at all interested how communist societies work, if you're at all interested about the inner workings and why it always leads to the same result, I highly recommend you the book of Mikhail Vasilensky, Nomenclature. That's the word I actually picked up from his book. I knew the word before, but I truly understand how the ruling class emerges thanks to that book. It's an extremely powerful document of time, and you're gonna love it. It's written eloquently, it's very informative, and you're gonna learn a lot from it, even if you don't care about the Soviet Union. You're gonna learn a lot about how governments work in general.
Yeah, I started to read it and I find it, very long. But fortunately, in Poland, it was printed during the communist regime, and fortunately, it was written that in Polish they cut a lot of things, useless things. So
I
think
wouldn't say it's useless, but it's a great book.
it's a great book.
You'll have
I
a lot
saw-
of insights.
Yeah, he started with some quotes of Lenin, Marx, Engels, and I love it too. So yeah, I think that we can recommend our viewers to read this book either in English, either in Russian or in Polish, because it's affordable. You can buy it on Allegro PL, so it's okay. Now it's a very personal question. So there is some kind of saying that every man should divide his activities into profession, family, hobby, passion, and sport. What do you think about it? What are you as a man?
Yeah, actually, it's a great question because I started to do politics late in life. I've only been active for the past 4 years. Before that, I was enjoying myself. I actually traveled a lot. I've been to 77 countries. Well, now 78, counting Colombia. I speak 4 languages. I actually have two degrees, one in political sciences from the UK and another from Film Academy in New Zealand. And I actually had a movie. I actually wrote a movie that was a short movie that was released in New Zealand, and a black comedy. I have politics has not been a major part of my life before 4 years ago. What else? Yeah, I've been successful financially. I had a lot of business projects in Japan. I lived in Japan for 4.5 years. I've been selling Japanese merchandise. That's how I raised my first proper money. And then I invested in cryptocurrencies, and the rest is history. I'm a well-off individual right now. So yeah.
And family?
Well, I had a very long-lasting relationship with a girl that was also a witness at the case at me. We are very close friends still, and I have another relationship right now that's just started a year ago.
Okay, so thank you very much for this second episode of our talks. I saw the presentation you gave today. For sure, it will be translated with the Polish subtitles, because I think that some Polish leaders may learn a lot from this presentation, and maybe you have some special. Would you say something to Poles? To
Poles.
Poland?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think Poland is in a great position to avoid all the mistakes of the Western Europe, and not to repeat the mistakes of Russia either. So you're in a good position where you can learn from mistakes of your neighbors and do something better. And please use that opportunity, because right now world is in is in a terrible place. And another quote that I like, it's a quote that I made. That I think is quite powerful, at least in Russian it sounds powerful, that government is never a solution. It's always a problem that requires a solution. And as long as you deal with government following that maxim, you're going to be all right.
Could you say it in Russian?
Государство, I can. Государство это не проблема, государство это не решение проблемы, это проблема, которая требует решения.
Perfect. Yeah. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.